Hello, everyone. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from. Now settle in, the darkness has a story for you. How much can a stranger learn about you just by watching? And how long would it take before you even noticed? I was 24, working the overnight shift at a family diner off the highway. From the outside, it looked cozy, a glowing neon coffee cup and a big "Open 24 hours" sign in red. But inside, it had that tired, worn-out feeling. Fluorescent lights, cracked red vinyl booths, and coffee smells baked into everything. My shift was always the same, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., Tuesday through Saturday. Same apron, same gold name tag, same car, same spot behind the building. It felt like survival, not a career. Then he showed up. It was a Tuesday at 1:38 a.m. I remember the time because I'd just written it in the log. Dishwasher jammed again when the bell over the door jingled. I looked up expecting a group of drunk kids or a bored trucker. Instead, there was just one guy, late 30s, maybe early 40s, average height, average build. Dark zip-up jacket, plain baseball cap, jeans. No logos, nothing flashy. The kind of guy your eyes would normally slide right over. But he didn't want to be ignored. He stood in the doorway for a second, like he was figuring out the room, then chose the booth directly across from the register. Not by the window, not at the counter. Dead center, perfect view of the door, the kitchen, and me. I grabbed a menu and walked over. Up close, there were two things that gave me a cold feeling in my stomach. First, he didn't glance around the diner the way new people do. No looking at the specials board or the pie case. His eyes stayed on me the entire time. Not in a leering way, more like he was studying me. Second, his clothes. Everyone else coming in that week had thick coats, scarves, hats. But him? That thin jacket, zipped all the way up. It didn't make sense. Like he wasn't planning to stay outside long enough to feel cold. I did my usual routine, offered coffee, set down the menu. He asked for water, for now. He didn't open the menu, just sat there, hands around his glass, eyes drifting lazily around the room, always coming back to me. He stayed almost 3 hours. No food, no coffee, just that glass of water, and his eyes following everything I did. How often I checked the clock, which tables I wiped twice, how I moved when the drunk guy raised his voice. Nothing I could call him out on, just awareness. When he finally left around 4:30, he placed a 5 under the water glass. No receipt, no bill, just a tip for occupying space. Weird, but fine, I thought. At least he wasn't grabbing me or writing his number on napkins like half the men who came through. The next night, he came back. Same time, same booth. And the next night, and the next. By the end of the first week, my line cook, Larry, started calling him your boyfriend. He'd joke about when I was going to stop giving him free water and start charging rent. We laughed, but the truth was simple. He only came in when I worked, not on Martin's shifts, not on Sundays, just mine. Once I noticed that, something shifted. I started paying attention to his timing. He'd walk in between 1:30 and 1:45 every shift I had, right on the dot. Always within a few minutes, and he'd leave around 4:15, give or take, never rushed. Never looked like he was killing time. The diner wasn't just a pit stop for him, it was his place. What finally made me stop ignoring him was how much he noticed me too. One night, halfway through the second week, I walked past his booth, and he casually mentioned that I'd parked in a different spot. I hadn't told him where I parked. It took me a second to process it. I laughed a little, asking what he meant, like I didn't know. But he explained, in that mild, unbothered tone, that I usually parked in the back corner by the dumpster, facing out. But tonight, I was 2 spaces closer to the back door. He said it like it was no big deal, like someone commenting on the weather. Then he kept going. He mentioned how I always sat in my car for a couple of minutes before coming inside, that I scrolled my phone, put my hair up, checked my teeth in the visor mirror. And then, quietly, almost kindly, he added that on Thursdays, I usually cried in the car before I came inside, probably because I got my next week's schedule. He shouldn't have known any of that. There were no windows back there, no camera facing the lot. Those were my private 2 or 3 minutes before the shift, when I could just be myself. Not Emma in a name tag. I thought I was invisible, but he'd been out there, watching. After that, the air between us changed. I still did my job, refilled his coffee when he started ordering, cleared his empty cup, wiped the table. But I stopped pretending he was just some guy. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? A customer watches me and knows my habits? People don't get banned for that. My manager would just tell me to be careful and get back to work. The only one who seemed concerned was Larry. He started hanging around the front more when the guy was in, checking on me under the pretense of asking about orders. He told me not to go out back alone. He joked less. Then one night, while my watcher sat in his usual booth with his untouched coffee, the TV in the corner started showing footage from another diner up the highway. A man had robbed them with a knife. He'd sat for hours, ordered almost nothing, waited until the place was quiet, then cleaned out the register. He tried to drag the waitress to his car, but she jumped out at a red light and broke her wrist. The still they used on the news was grainy. Cheap overhead camera, harsh light, angle from the wrong side. You never get a perfect shot in those images. But the shape of him, the baseball cap, the jacket zipped to the throat, the way he sat with his back to the wall and eyes on the door was all too familiar. Could be anyone, Larry said next to me, but his voice didn't sound convinced. That night, my watcher didn't show up. At first, I thought, good, maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe he'd moved on. Maybe he was just a lonely guy with weird hobbies. Or maybe I had overreacted. He didn't come the next night, or the one after that. The booth across from the register sat empty, but I still caught myself glancing at it, expecting to see the cap, the jacket, the eyes. It was 3 days later when I found the napkin. It was tucked under the sugar caddy at his table. I almost threw it away without looking. People leave napkins all the time. But my name was written on the outside in neat block letters. Emma. Inside were 3 lines. You really should park where there are cameras. Stop crying in your car. He isn't worth it. Some men are worse than me. I hadn't told anyone I cried in my car. I hadn't told anyone where I parked. I definitely hadn't told anyone about the mess I was in with someone I thought I could trust. He'd been watching all of it, cataloging it, deciding what was worth his attention. A few weeks later, I changed my schedule, took earlier shifts, stopped parking out back. I tried not to cry in the car at all, even when I wanted to. I moved on. Different cafe, different city, new name tag. Months later, I was scrolling the news in a new apartment when I clicked a link about a robbery at another all-night diner in a neighboring county. The article had a still frame from security footage. It was grainy with the same bad lighting, and the face was angled away. But the silhouette was disturbingly familiar. Cap, jacket zipped to the neck, head turned just enough to hide the face. Under the image was a quote from the waitress, who survived. She said he'd sat for hours, barely eating, just watching her. She said that when she mentioned taking the trash out after close, he quietly told her that she should stop parking in the back corner by the dumpsters, because you never know who's watching you out there. She said she'd never told anyone where she parked. Neither had I. I don't know if it was him. I'll never know. There are plenty of men with average builds, baseball caps, and jackets. Plenty of guys who like patterns and quiet corners. Plenty of women who can't afford to quit. What scares me isn't the thought that I served coffee to a violent man for a couple of weeks. What scares me is the idea that, in his mind, he might have genuinely thought he was doing me a favor. You'd be surprised how easy it is for someone to live right next to you without being seen, especially when everyone assumes the cameras see everything. I worked nights in a distribution warehouse out on the edge of an industrial park. From the outside, it was just a concrete block with a logo. Inside, it was rows of metal racks stacked to the ceiling, forklifts beeping, and that constant humming buzz from overhead lights that never fully turn off. Night shift was small. One supervisor in a glass office, a couple of forklift drivers, a few pickers. We loaded trucks while the rest of the city slept. The air always smelled like cardboard dust, diesel, and whatever the latest spilled product was. The building was laid out in long aisles, rows 1 through 30, with cross aisles every so often. Cameras pointed down the main paths and docks, but not everywhere. Everyone knew there were blind spots in the middle. That's where people snuck texts, quick naps, occasional hookups. We joked about it. Row 17, my buddy Jonah used to say on break, that's where the ghosts live. Turned out he wasn't that far off. That night, we were short-staffed. 2 loaders had called out, so it was just me at Dock 3, Jonah on the forklift, and our supervisor, Mark, half watching us through his office window and half watching whatever was on his phone. Around 1:40 a.m., a rush order came through. Mark printed it and waved it like a surrender flag. Cleaning supplies, row 17, Bay D. We need it on truck 5 minutes ago, he said, then pointed at the temp, a kid named Marco we'd gotten from the agency. You, go pull that pallet. Marco nodded a little too fast, grabbed a manual pallet jack, and disappeared into the racks. I went back to loading my truck. 15 minutes passed. No pallet, no Marco. I called him on the radio. No response. Asked Jonah if he'd seen him. He hadn't, but he swore a little about having to cover someone else's pics. At some point, you go from he's slow to something's wrong. I hit that point. I told Jonah I'd go find him and headed down the main aisle toward row 17. The deeper you walk into those rows at night, the more the sound drops away. The clatter of the docks fades until all you hear is your own footsteps, the distant beep-beep of a forklift, the uneven hum of old lights. Row 17 always felt different. One of the overhead fixtures had been dead for months, leaving a stretch of shadow in the middle, like a bruise. Marco, I called, stepping into the row. My voice sounded small between those metal shelves. No answer, no movement, just stacks of boxes wrapped in cloudy plastic, labels staring back at me. Pet food, cereal, cleaning products. I walked down the row, checking the bays. No pallet pulled, no jack parked neatly. When I got to the cross aisle at the end, I saw it. A pallet jack shoved sideways, blocking the exit. We're not supposed to leave equipment like that. It's a tripping hazard, a forklift hazard, a what the hell hazard in general. I squeezed around it, muttering about idiots, and that's when I saw the box cutter on the ground behind it. Bright yellow handle, blade extended. I picked it up. It was warm. Something about that. The combination of the dead light, the stale air, and a tool that should have been cold sitting warm in my hand made the hair on my arms stand up. There was a smell too. Not just cardboard and dust. Something sharper, human, like sweat that had soaked into fabric and never seen a washer. I swept my phone's flashlight along the bottom shelves on the left side. That's when I saw the gap. It was subtle. Just a few pallets pulled slightly away from the racks, creating a narrow, dark space between the boxes and the back wall. If you weren't looking for it, you'd never notice. To anyone walking past, it would just look like wonky stacking. If you crouched down, though, the gap was big enough for a person to slide into. I crouched. The smell got stronger. My heartbeat got louder. I angled the light in. On the concrete floor, someone had laid out a flattened cardboard box like a bed. An empty water bottle, a couple of crumpled fast food wrappers, an old jacket balled up like a pillow, and, at the very back of the space, a pair of eyes squeezed shut so hard the skin wrinkled. They opened when the light hit them. He wasn't Marco. He was older, maybe mid-40s, with an uneven beard and deep lines in his face. His clothes were layered and dirty: hoodie, work shirt, thin jacket. Hands came up empty and in front of him like someone used to being shouted at. He didn't lunge, didn't growl, didn't do anything dramatic. He just looked like a man who'd been caught somewhere he shouldn't be. My first instinct was stupid. Something like, "You can't be here. This is employees only." As if this was a movie and he'd apologize and leave. What I actually said was, "How long have you been in here?" His voice sounded unused when he answered. Rough, quiet. He told me it had been a while. That he came in late, slept a few hours, and left early. That he didn't touch pallets or take anything from shelves. He said he just took food from the trash when he could, and sometimes salvaged from broken boxes. He kept saying, "I'm not a thief. I'm just tired." Up close, I saw a faded tattoo on his forearm, our company logo and a barcode, a style we used on old employee badges and shirts years back. "You used to work here," I said. He glanced at his arm like he'd forgotten it was there, said something about layoffs, about cheaper temp contracts, about missing a rent payment, and then everything else collapsing. It wasn't a sob story, just facts, told like he'd said them to himself a lot. My radio crackled on my belt, making both of us jump. "Hey," Mark's voice buzzed through. "You find Romeo yet? We got trucks waiting." I stared at the man and said you saw it's the gap. There's a line in your head between weird situation and call the cops. I was trying to figure out which side of it I was on. If I reported him, he'd be dragged out, maybe arrested for trespassing or theft, banned from the property, pushed onto another patch of cold concrete somewhere else. If I didn't, I was technically letting a stranger live in our building, right next to where we walked every night. I told Mark I'd found the problem and that I'd handle the pallet. Then, to the man, I said, "You can't sleep here anymore." He froze, waiting for the rest. "Get your stuff," I said. "You have to leave. And if you come back, someone will eventually see you who isn't me." He studied my face like he was trying to figure out if this was a trick. Then he nodded. He moved out of that gap fast, like he'd practiced his escape route, shoved the cardboard under his arm, tucked the wrappers into a plastic bag, grabbed the jacket. On his way past me, he murmured, "Thank you," in a voice that had too much in it to unpack. He slipped around the corner toward the side exit. I started to warn him about the alarm, but he just smiled a little and said the alarm on that door hadn't worked for months. He was right. The door opened, no sound. By the time I got back to the dock, he was gone. Mark was annoyed about the delay. Jonah was doubled up on work, the driver was glaring, and life rolled over the moment like it was nothing. An hour later, when things calmed down, I asked Mark why he'd sent Marco to row 17 if Marco was so hopeless. Mark frowned, said Marco had called out sick before shift. There was no temp that night. I checked the log at the time clock. It was just 3 names. Mine, Jonah's, Mark's. No Marco. We chalked it up to Mark misremembering and the agency being useless. But if no extra worker had come in, that meant the only person unaccounted for in the building that night had been the man in the racks. A week later, curiosity or paranoia sent me back to row 17. The gap was still there. Smaller, like the pallets had been nudged back. But you could still see the outline of where something had been laid on the floor. No cardboard, no wrappers, no bottle, just dust. In row 19, a few nights after that, I found another gap. This one empty, except for an old ID badge half buried in dirt. The picture too smudged to make out. Company logo split by a crack. The name had been scratched clean off. I handed it to Mark. He glanced at it, shrugged, dropped it in the trash, said something about the old guys and how they'd always complained about cameras and surveillance, then laughed at the irony. I didn't laugh. I don't work there anymore. Different job, different building, different hum in the walls. But when I'm in big box stores late at night, or warehouses, or any place with high ceilings and long aisles, I catch myself looking for those gaps. Places where the cameras don't quite reach, where the light doesn't quite hit the floor. Spaces just big enough for someone to slide into and vanish when the forklifts pass. We like to tell ourselves the scary people are the ones kicking in doors or crouching in closets. The truth is, some of them are just very quiet, very patient, and very good at finding the spaces we don't think to look at, like row 17. Some nights, the scariest thing isn't who walks into your store, it's who they're going home with. I worked the graveyard shift at a 24-hour gas station on the edge of a residential area, 2 old pumps under a flickering canopy, a cramped little shop that smelled like coffee, rubber, and cheap air fresheners, and 1 single-stall bathroom with a key attached to a giant plastic disc so nobody stole it. My boss liked to say we were low risk because we weren't next to a highway. Just locals, he'd say, as if locals are incapable of doing terrible things. Graveyard work turns you into a pattern machine. You learn who buys what time they show up, what they look like when they're tired versus angry versus drunk. The trucker who always gets the same brand of chips. The nurse who buys black coffee and scratch cards. The teenage boy who hovers too long near the energy drinks because he's broke and embarrassed to admit it. And then there was her. In my head, I called her Red because of her hair. Dyed too bright at some point and now grown out so that dark roots framed her face under the harsh fluorescence. She looked early 30s, maybe, slim without trying. Always in the same gray hoodie and worn jeans. No coat, even when it was cold enough that my breath fogged when I propped the door. She drove a silver sedan with a cracked headlight. She came in between 2 and 3 in the morning, never any earlier, never with anyone else. Sometimes twice a week. Sometimes I wouldn't see her for 10 days. Her routine was always the same. Pull up to pump 2, engine idling, shoulders hunched. Fill just enough gas to get somewhere, never a full tank. Come inside to pay in cash if she was alone. If there was a shape in the passenger seat, a man, always slumped back like he didn't even need to be awake, she'd stay at the pump and let him handle the payment. The first time she came in, she asked for the bathroom key without looking me in the eye. Her voice was polite, flat. when she took the giant plastic disc from my hand. Her sleeve rode up. There were 4 oval bruises on her wrist where fingers had dug in hard enough to leave a mark. One on the other side where the thumb would have been, fading from that ugly brownish purple to sickly yellow. I've worked nights long enough to know the difference between someone banging into a table and someone getting grabbed. I didn't say anything. I handed her the key and watched her go. She stayed in the bathroom long enough that I started to worry. People sit on that closed toilet and cry. You learn to tell the difference between I'm sick, silence, and I'm falling apart, silence. When it tipped too far into the second one, I knocked and asked if she was all right. She murmured that she was. When she opened the door, her eyes were red and the collar of her hoodie was damp from splashed water. She bought a cheap coffee, paid with crumpled notes, and left. The next time she came, there was a man in the passenger seat. I never saw his face clearly that first visit. His cap was low. The interior light didn't come on when he opened the door. I saw enough to know he was in his 30s, clean-shaven, wearing a decent jacket, not a stereotypical monster. Just someone's boyfriend, or husband, or mistake that got too expensive to fix. He came in that time, not her. Paid for $20 on pump 2, looked around the store like he was measuring it. His eyes lingered a little too long on the security camera dome in the corner. He mentioned, almost in passing, that she had freaked out last time because she thought the bathroom lock had stuck. Said she gets dramatic, makes scenes out of nothing. Said it with a fond little smile that didn't reach his eyes. That's the thing about some men like that. They telegraph what they are if you know how to read it. After that, it turned into a pattern. Alone some nights, with him others. When she was alone, she'd sometimes come in, buy a charger, a coffee, stand a little too long by the hot drinks with her hands wrapped around a cup she hadn't paid for yet, like she was imagining a world where she could stay. When he was there, she stayed small, paid at the pump, eyes on the nozzle, shoulders up. One night, she came on foot. It was about 2:30 a.m. I saw her through the glass, walking along the road in just that hoodie, no car, no bag. It was cold enough that my breath fogged inside when the door opened. She came straight to the counter and asked for the bathroom key. Up close, I saw the edge of a new bruise creeping up her neck under the hood. I gave her the key, told her she could take her time. Offered water, coffee, the usual harmless things. She was in there a long time. When she came out, her eyes were swollen from crying. In the bathroom trash, I later found the torn packaging from a prepaid SIM card and the snapped-in-half pieces of a cheap burner phone. I told her quietly that there was a landline behind the counter. No caller ID on outgoing calls. No questions. I said it like I was commenting on the weather, just letting the information exist between us. She shook her head and said she didn't have anyone to call. Then she bought a portable charger, of all things, paid cash, and walked back out into the dark. I watched her until the night took her. I still don't know where she was going. The night everything came to a head, the rain was coming down in sheets. It was a Wednesday, the kind of shift where the hours crawl. I was behind the counter making a new pot of coffee when I heard tires squeal. The silver sedan swung into the lot at an angle, half sliding on the wet asphalt. It didn't stop at the pumps. It stopped at the door. The driver's door flew open and Red stumbled out. The bruise on her face was fresh this time, angry purple, splitting her lip. Her hoodie hung crooked. She didn't look toward pump 2. She ran straight for the entrance. There's a particular expression people get when they've decided to run. It's terror and determination, both crammed into a too small space. She came to the counter out of breath and asked if she could use the bathroom, voice small but surprisingly steady. I pressed the bathroom key into her hand and told her to lock it. He came in maybe 10 seconds later, still that careful, casual walk, like nothing was wrong. Rain in his hair, jacket zipped. He greeted me like this was normal, said they'd been arguing, that she was worked up, that she does this. He saw the way I looked at her face, saw the way I didn't look away. There's a moment in those interactions where everything balances on the edge of a choice. He could pretend I believed him. I could pretend nothing was wrong. Instead, I told him straight that I could call an ambulance or the police. I told him it wasn't my business what stories they told each other. But once they walked in here bleeding, it was mine. He leaned on the counter then, lowered his voice, tried to pull me into his logic, said she makes things up, that she likes to show people bruises and leave out the context, that cops ruin everybody's lives, that I'd be making it worse. In the bathroom, a cabinet door slammed. The sound carried all the way to us. I couldn't see her from where I was, but I knew she heard every word. When she came back out, she didn't go to him. She walked to the counter and asked, in this very calm, deliberate way, if she could use the store phone. He started to say, no. I pushed the handset toward her anyway. She dialed a number without looking at the keypad, like she'd memorized it somewhere quiet. When someone picked up, she said who she was and where she was. She said, he's here. And then, can you bring them? Her voice cracked once, then went flat again. He realized then that this wasn't about me being nosy or making it worse. She'd already decided. I saw it land in his eyes. He told her she was being dramatic, that she'd regret this, that she was overreacting like always. She didn't even look at him. She handed the phone back to me with shaking hands and stepped away. The sirens were faint at first, somewhere out in the wet dark. They got louder fast. He hesitated. Go after her. Come at me. Get out before cops pulled in. His anger ran up against his instinct for self-preservation and finally settled on retreat. He told her, loud enough for everyone to hear, that if she went through with this, he'd make sure her life was worse, that he knew where her family lived, standard threats. Then he left, got in the car, tore out of the lot so hard he clipped the curb and sent a sheet of water across the pumps. The police arrived less than 2 minutes later. Her family, brother, sister-in-law, 2 sleepy kids in the back, arrived not long after that. There was a lot of talking, a lot of paperwork, a lot of low voices and tired rage. I watched through the glass as she got into their car instead of the silver sedan. For the first time, she had her back to him instead of the other way around. The next time I saw him, it wasn't in person. It was in a mugshot on my manager's computer when corporate emailed a safety notice. He'd been picked up at his mother's place 2 towns over. Turned out there were already warrants. We'd just speed-run the inevitable. Everyone told me I'd done the right thing, that it was a good outcome, that we'd helped someone get out. I didn't feel heroic. I just felt aware. Because for every time it works like that, someone has family to call. Cops show up in time. There's at least one person on shift who doesn't pretend not to see. There are nights where nobody pulls in. Nobody makes it to pump 2. Nobody asks for the bathroom key. Months later, I ran into her on the opposite side of town. Different hair color, better coat, a kid's backpack slung over her shoulder. She looked lighter, not fixed, not magically healed, just less like a person waiting to be hit. She recognized me immediately, walked over, thanked me for not looking away. I told her she was the one who made the call. She said that's true. but that it's easier to dial when you know someone on the other side of the counter isn't going to roll their eyes and act like you're inconveniencing them. I still work nights now, different job. Every time a woman comes in alone at 2 or 3 in the morning with that tight smile and those careful sleeves, I don't ask, "Are you okay?" Like she can fix it by saying yes. I just make sure she knows the cameras work, the phone is there, and someone on the graveyard shift is paying attention. Because horror isn't always a stranger breaking in from outside. Sometimes it's the person waiting in the car at pump 2.